Good afternoon, and welcome to the third edition of the Ohio State University's Office of Diversity and Inclusion's Driving Change webinar series, a dialogue and discussion format for our corporate and institutional partners focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion in institutions, places of work, and corporate America. I am Kurt Ely, Executive Director of Corporate Relations at The Ohio State University. Before we begin, I would like to share a few brief logistics around today's event. First and foremost, we encourage your questions. They will be accepted using the Q&A function during the course of the webinar. Requests for follow-up can also be posted in the same manner. Future webinars are being planned for December and into the new year, so please be on the lookout for email invitations for those dates. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be available following today's event. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the host for this series, Dr. James Moore. Dr. Moore is the Vice Provost for Diversity and Inclusion and Chief Diversity Officer for The Ohio State University. In addition, Dr. Moore, along with Dean Tom Gregoire, co-chair the university's Task Force on Racism and Racial Inequities. Dr. Moore is an internationally recognized researcher focusing on school counseling, gifted education, higher education, and multicultural education and counseling, along with his work in STEM education. Dr. Moore, the program is yours.
Thank you, Kurt. It's a pleasure to work with you. First and foremost, I want to give a shout out for the collaboration with the corporate relations within University Advancement and helping us put on this webinar. I would like to welcome our guests and our distinguished panelists to our monthly webinar series, Driving Change. We believe that this series is timely as we celebrate our 50th anniversary within the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Monthly, the series provides corporations, universities, and other organizations engaged in diversity, equity, and inclusion work an opportunity to have access and to be able to engage Ohio State University in its efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. First, I would like to take some time to introduce our distinguished panelists. They all have extensive bios, so I'm going to refrain from trying to read all of the materials that highlight their storied careers. So I'm going to encourage the audience to revisit the website to see more of a comprehensive view. But first, I'd like to introduce one of our beloved students, also alumni of Ohio State University, as well as a recipient of the Moral Scholarship, Taylor Stokes. Second, I'd like to invite no stranger to the Buckeye Nation, C-suite leader, Executive Vice President, Chief Diversity Officer at NBC Universal, former President and General Manager of WCMH-TV, the NBC Columbus affiliate, Mr. Craig Robinson. And last but not least, my partner in crime, Dean Gregoire from the College of Social Work. I am delighted that we have them here with us today. And I'm going to first encourage our audience to submit their questions to the Q&A function so we can begin to entertain some of the questions that you may have. But I'm going to start out with a round robin. And Taylor, we'll start with you, and then Craig will start. Then you follow Taylor, and then Tom, you can be last. But first, why is diversity, equity, and inclusion work important to you personally and professionally? Why is it important to you?
Well, I would like to say, for obvious reasons, I am a person of color. So in that sense, diversity and inclusion is important to me in that way. But as a moral scholar and as a former student, I grew up in a very conservative, very, not very diverse area in Arizona. And coming to Ohio State was like a very big change for me. And that change, I think, bettered my education ultimately. I think knowing people who are very different from me and people who are just like me ultimately made me have a better experience in my college education.
Thank you. Craig.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Well, I think my interest was framed very early on. First of all, as a man of color, as a biracial man and a member of the LGBTQ community, and as the only child of a Chinese American mother and a Black father, I witnessed firsthand the discrimination that they faced when they were married many, many years ago. So that really informed my thinking about the work that needs to be done in our country from a very young age. And both my parents worked in public service, both serving underrepresented segments of the population. So conversations around the table were often on issues of social justice and often on issues of racism. And my father, as a veteran of Korea, told me many stories about the times that he, in uniform, spent time on leave in the South, and that he had experiences that were very much like The Green Book, the movie The Green Book. So it's hard to grow up with that identity and hearing those stories without, I think, having a passion and a desire to do good things in this area. Professionally, we know from every bit of research that we see that diverse organizations are more successful organizations and more profitable organizations. So from the professional standpoint, I want to make sure that the work I do makes NBC Universal as successful as it can be. So very, very much driven by personal as well as professional passion in this space.
Tom.
Thank you, James, panelists, and thanks everybody who's joined us today for deciding that this was the best use of your lunch hour. I hope you feel that way when we're done, and I appreciate your commitment. I'm the Dean of the College of Social Work. My entire profession exists because the status quo in our country is harmful to many people, and often that harm is distributed based on race and other variables associated with diversity. So when we signed up for this line of work, we signed up to go stand in the way of some of that harm. But it has to be personal as well, too. And I care deeply about my colleagues and my friends and my students. And I've listened enough to them to understand, not just intellectually, although that's important, but to understand emotionally how different an experience it is to be in the world when you don't look like me. And so that's important to me, and it feels like an obligation. And also, as Craig shared, it makes us better. Whatever else we are at the university, we're in the business of good ideas, diverse ideas, creativity. And some of the best ideas I ever had didn't come from me, and I hope I've always given credit to them. But you put 10 different people with 10 different backgrounds in a room, you get 100 good ideas. So for all those reasons, this is important to me.
Thank you. Taylor, it's always a pleasure to have a student on the panel that is not removed too far removed from the student experience. And so you're a very talented student, had lots of options, got accepted in some of the top institutions in the country. What were you looking for as a student of color in an institution, and why Ohio State University?
So thank you, first of all, Dr. Moore. As somebody, like I said before, as somebody who grew up in a very, single-minded at times kind of area of the country, it was not really on my radar, I feel like, initially to come to the Midwest. I feel like I would have thought it would have been a lot of the same of that. And then actually, funny enough, my dad, who's a Michigan fan, took me to visit Ohio State and Michigan, and we had the tour and everything, and they mentioned the moral scholarship, and he looked at me and he was like, "You could get that." I'm like, "I could get that." So I went out there, I applied. My parents always told me when it comes to where I'm going to go to college, I have to have skin in the game financially. If I wanted to go out of state, I had to make it happen through scholarship. and getting this scholarship was huge. I mean, it's truly a game changer. I don't think I wouldn't be here talking to all of you like I am right now without that scholarship. I probably wouldn't be on the career path I'm on without that scholarship. So, you know, that was a ultimate decision factor for me, was seeing a university that was like, hey, we value diversity. We think that you deserve to come here and not come here at an extreme cost. And that was hands down the biggest decision maker for me.
What might be a misnomer about the scholarship that shed some light about the scholarship that the audience may not know about the Moral Scholarship?
Yeah, so I think often, you see a diversity scholarship and just assume it's a handout for people of color. And I would say that's completely wrong. Many of the moral scholars that I know are, happen to be people of color, but there also happen to be people who are from, first generation college students. There are, Jewish people, there are deaf people, a number of different diverse perspectives and experiences. And so I think that's kind of the biggest thing, is it's not, you assume diversity means person of color, but it comes down to so many other deciding factors.
Thank you. Tom, I know you've been one of our great leaders on campus, and you're a co-chair of the task force on racism and racial inequalities. What is the university doing to make the place more inclusive, less and more anti-racist?
I'll start with we're doing a lot and we're not doing enough. There is, and we have to be honest with ourselves about both. We have a long way to go, and as I've said before, in this kind of work, there isn't actually a finish line. We need to not approach this work as something that we need to solve so we can move on to the next intriguing thing. We'll always be working with diversity, but our university is doing a great deal, and I'm hyper proud to be working here at this university and to be working with you, James, as you know, and you're probably going to have to interrupt me at some point, but the university's made an investment in funding seed grants to increase the number of faculty who are doing study in this area. And one of the strengths of those grants is that we require somebody to be engaged with the community. We can't sit here in our ivory tower and not be engaged. Our task force is taking a wide view that could best be characterized as trying to listen to all people, including those voices that don't get heard often, and looking for opportunities to grow and learn, and also finding some expertise when we do it well around here. I think we need to make long-term commitment. We're not as diverse as we want to be, but there are some prerequisites to becoming diverse. And one of those is deep inquiry and a willingness to learn about ourselves. So I think we're doing that. I think we're starting in that work. And again, there's no finish line in this work. When we make a commitment to this work, we live in it.
Greg, you work at a major company that has tremendous reach, and it employs a number of different employees. And your company is always looking for talent and diversity. Tell us a little bit about this $100 million investment that your company made in terms of engaging in diversity, inclusion, social justice activities, and what, at the end of the rainbow, what will be the return on the investment?
It's a big question. And I will try to keep it as concise as possible. Before I answer that question, though, I did want to call back to something that Taylor said, which I think is so insightful. Diversity has become shorthand, I think, for many of us, for people of color, and oftentimes women, but people of color certainly. And I think the reason it has is because in many of the areas of society, like corporate America and like the senior levels of corporate America or CEOs in most corporate America, that is what it means because there are so few women and people of color in some of those positions. So, but it is a good reminder that diversity in and of itself does not mean that, but that in some of the sectors in which we're working, it's become a shorthand for that. On June 8th, the Comcast CEO did announce the $100 million commitment. So thank you for mentioning that, Dr. Moore. And if you Google Comcast $100 million commitment, it'll come up. You'll see a couple of articles in the Hollywood Reporter and I believe Variety that speak about that commitment. And it was a sweeping statement that we were going to invest both dollars and the power of our platforms to really driving change at this moment, because I think it was so clear to Brian Roberts and to my CEO, Jeff Shell, and to Sky CEO, Jeremy DeRoche, and Dave Watson also sent a letter out, who runs Comcast Cable, that this moment had to be different. And so one of the questions people say to me is, does it really feel different this time? And I say, I certainly hope so. But I also imagine that standing out in that mall with Dr. King, many people thought that that was a moment where everything was going to be different. And here we are this many years later with so many of the very same problems. And not as much progress as certainly we would like to have seen. So it was a statement that we are having long overdue, difficult conversations, and that we are going to make a 3-year commitment. And of course, it's beyond 3 years, but by saying 3 years, what we were saying was we're not going to be just talking about this for the next few weeks, because we're certainly not going to solve these institutional 400+ year problems in a matter of a few weeks or 3 years. But I feel very, very encouraged that we are going to make significant progress, not only because of the dollars, because as I think, as we discussed in a previous call, the money is important, but the commitment of senior leadership is equally, if not more important, because you can have all the money in the world to put to these programs, but if you don't have the senior leadership commitment, I do not think you can be successful. The other is true, however. You don't need the money is helpful, but you need the senior level commitment. So at the end of the 3 years, we are very metric based. And so we can look at the numbers. We always have been. I've been doing this job for 9 years, and we're seeing the uptick in the increased representation among women, people of color, LGBTQ, people with disabilities. We measure this. We'll be able to actually look at that. And culturally, another measure is our employee surveys, where people anonymously tell us what it feels like to work at this organization. And we are going to be looking for improvement there as well, and how people say it feels, either as people of color or as women or as members of other underrepresented groups, or as allies of those groups, how it feels at NBC Universal culturally. So we have both hard numbers, we have survey data, but we have real ways to take a look at what success will mean.
Well, I'm going to take a question and I'm going to come back to you because we have a question from the audience. And this specific person says, how can we as incoming employees create effective dialogue around diversity in the workplace?
And that's back to me, Dr. Moore?
Yes.
We are dependent on our employees to tell us what we are doing right and what they need. And as an incoming employee, that's a particular advantage because you're looking at our organization or whatever organization you're joining with fresh eyes. So I think the first thing that you do is you find the platforms where you can have that voice. At many companies now, I'd say most major companies, and if they don't have them now, they are forming them, have either what they call affinity groups, employee resource groups, or business resource groups. And they are generally open to anyone, and they're volunteer, and they're looking for passionate people who are going to come in and, in addition to their regular job, drive these programs. So that's an ideal way to have your voice heard, and to also be surrounded by other people who will be similarly motivated to drive change. So as a brand new employee, it may seem a little frustrating because you think, well, wait, I'm not in this room and I'm not in that room. You can be in that room, that employee resource group room, right away. And I'll speak for NBC Universal, and I know Comcast as well. These groups have thousands, tens of thousands of members, well funded by the organization, executive sponsors for each of the 9 groups. So these are very senior leadership level people who can take the messages back that you have. So it's a very quick way to connect with people who can actually affect change. And we need your input.
Thank you. Tom, this is a question that came, and I'm slightly altering the question, but I think it's not altering it that it will lose its original intent. How can we mitigate the negative responses and possible consequences that may arise from speaking out against inclusionary injustice in the workplace?
Yeah, I like that question a lot, and it is a challenge. This work takes a bit of courage. And it also takes a recognition that many of the people who are speaking out of it are speaking from fear. So I always try to enter this space with a bit of compassion and a bit of understanding. And I recognize I'm hanging out with a lot of social workers, so I live in a bubble. But I also live in a world where, as I said, people are very threatened by this. They think they're going to lose something. There's this zero-sum thought about diversity, and there's not a whole lot of evidence that that's actually true. That when you're working in a more diverse culture, when you're more creative, you're more effective, and all of that. But I think first, just meet people where they are. That's what we always say in social work. And what I would also say is, don't bombard people with facts when they're not ready to hear them. There's plenty of evidence around this topic, but first, just create permission to raise your skepticism. I'd much rather somebody come to me and say, I'm not sure about this, than say nothing and undermine it or not engage. So a lot of it is giving permission, to saying how you feel about it, what are your concerns about it, and then working with that. And I'm going to throw in one more because you don't know where my mute button is. Helping colleagues listen to each other. I watched people really be transformed by that. Some years ago, we sat for an hour and a half with many of our faculty and staff members of color and listened to what their lives were like on a daily basis. I mean, we knew all this intellectually, but then we looked at people that we cared about, and we cried through some of that. But allowing this to be a very human experience is also really important too.
Taylor, come back to you, and certainly very talented student, promising future, and right now you're trying to decide on which law school that you're going to attend. We know you've gotten accepted at some of the top 15 law schools in America. What are you looking for? You hadn't officially sent in your paperwork to say I'm coming. What sort of things are you looking for as a woman of color with tremendous genius and capability? Help the audience to understand. Put us in your mind. What are you looking for? What are you going to be evaluating in determining whether or not you go to the specific law school that you choose in the fall?
Yeah, frankly, being very, very open, frank, and honest about diversity and where they can be better, I think is a very attractive feature. I think that's something that I've really appreciated about Ohio State, even especially as an employee, how frank, open, and honest people have been. I think trying to hide what goes on and, tiptoe around the topic can be kind of problematic when it's something that needs to be looked at head on. So I'm looking for a university that, values diversity, of course, but is going to be very open in that conversation and not just say, we value diversity, and then ultimately not show anything that would suggest that. That's by far a huge decision maker in this, because the legal field is predominantly white men. So given the opportunity to go somewhere that values people of color in their standpoint and women of color in their standpoint is a very attractive feature of a law school.
Craig, I'm sure we probably share the same experience, but it probably manifests differently in the corporate sector, differently than at the university level. This is a question that comes from the audience. How do you respond to individuals not at the leadership level who don't think diversity work is important and think it's a distraction from your company's mission?
I actually looked in the Q&A and I saw that question, and I was hoping you'd ask me, truly. So thank you, Aaron, for asking that question, because it's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about, because having been doing this work, whether informally as a leader of color, whether it was running a television station or leading a sales organization, or for the past 9 years exclusively at the corporate level, I've had to step back at certain points and say, who is my audience? And what progress are we making? And how do I break through to the people that are not on board? I think I said this to you, Dr. Moore, and to a couple of the other folks on a prep call. This work can be a bit of an echo chamber, because we're all talking about this together. Everybody, I think certainly the panelists, I think the people at OSU, and I would imagine a great number of people who tuned in for this, just based on the title, understand the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or else perhaps they wouldn't be here. So what I find is when we're talking to each other, it's very easy to think that, okay, everybody's on board because everyone's nodding, this is great, and everyone has another great idea. What I think a sobering reality is, and I'm not saying this as a judgment, I'm saying this again as somebody who studies data, what we know is, if we're taking a look at the election results as they're coming out now, and again, I'm not making a political statement or a judgment, but there are a large number of people in this country and other countries who don't think that diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that needs to be advanced. They actually don't think that there are barriers to entry for certain groups, and don't think that we need to have programs, pipeline programs, or other development programs. I, of course, disagree, but they are entitled to have that view. And as I've worked through this position, it's become clear to me that I should be spending as much, if not more time, talking to those people as I am to the people who are part of my echo chamber. And the way to do that, the best possible way to do that, is to make the case for it from a business perspective. And I know that's a bit of a cliche. It's good business. You have to be more specific than that when you're talking to your peers who may not be on the journey for the same reason that you are. At NBC Universal, an entertainment company, and similar other CBS, Warner Media, whoever, it's pretty clear. If you are creating content, whether that be film, scripted, unscripted, for a diverse audience, a global audience, or an increasingly diversifying domestic audience, you are going to be able to create content that appeals to that audience best by having people from those groups sitting at the table. That doesn't mean that a non-diverse content creator can't create content for a diverse audience, but certainly we know, if you think about a couple of Universal projects we had, Get Out, the Jordan Peele movie, that I would argue needed to come from the mind of a Black filmmaker. It's a particular perspective, and that was an enormously successful movie for Universal Pictures. So while I may not know what's in the mind of my coworker, what I can say to him or her, if they are non-diverse, or even if they're diverse, not everybody diverse thinks that we need to even be on this journey. So we're not monolithic, no one group is, well, if that isn't an argument for having diverse storytellers, the X hundreds of millions of dollars in operating cash flow that came into our company, which makes your job more secure and my job more secure, I don't know what is. And certainly as a news organization, how can we properly and appropriately tell stories about Black Lives Matter's protests, anti-Asian racism, the pandemic's disproportionate effect on indigenous communities, people with disabilities, if we don't have people with those perspectives in the newsroom? Because it's not that the people in the newsroom who don't have those perspectives are bad people, they just may not have the lived experience. So for a company like mine, there are many compelling ways to talk to that coworker. Help us, this makes us a stronger company. Other industries, their line may not be that direct, but certainly any company that has a customer base that, as we know, is increasingly diverse can certainly benefit from product development, whether it's skincare or hair care or literature, can certainly benefit from having a diverse group of individuals at the table to talk about what your product should look like to get maximum result.
Thank you. Tom, this is a sort of like a retrospective question from the audience. And this comes from an individual who said he came back from Vietnam and matriculated at OSU and had an experience in which he was blocked from classroom by several Black students. And he later discovered that these students were advocating for more classes on Black history. And he says that's about 50 years ago, because right now, last year we celebrated 50 years of our African American and African Studies program. So he's asking the question because this is the question that people often present to us, especially who graduated many, many years ago. They want to know, how has the university changed? And so the specific question is, how much has improved in providing Black history courses at OSU? And he also wants to know, are white students taking such courses?
I will be able to answer this question better in about an hour and a half, because my next meeting is with the chair of African and African American Studies to talk about their work and how we might collaborate. However, we've come a long way from, and I'm fairly aware of the work that a faculty member who's not been with us for many years, named Charles Ross, was first recruited to this university to start that program, and then later came over to the College of Social Work. So I learned at the knee of Charles some about that. I think that we've come a long way in that regard, and not far enough. You know, there's a guy across the hall who is undergraduate was in women, gender, and sexuality studies, and he identifies as a man. How cool is that? That we have, we often have students who come to us having taken the African and African American history, either a minor or that graduate, so or undergraduate course. So yes, I think we've come a long way. I think we have a very strong department in that area, and our good colleagues with them, and that's probably going to always be my answer. We also need to continue to do more. One of the things that I really like about that area and about our work is we're getting more involved in the community too. We shouldn't do this in a bubble. That group teaches courses out in the community as we do as well too. So we connect in that way. So, and to our person who asked the question, I'm happy that you were curious enough to find out why you couldn't get into the building and saw that it was perhaps something you could identify with. And so I appreciate your willingness to always be curious and learn what's really going on.
Thank you. Taylor, I want to come back to you. And so I know you're going to be influential, and I know you're going to be transformative in whatever sector you decide to land in. Just imagine that you were, let's substitute President Johnson for a minute, our new president, who's the 16th president of the university. And just imagine that you're the president, and what kind of investments would you make if you were the president of Ohio State University into diversity, equity, inclusion efforts? What would be some initial investments where you think, as a student who spent 4 years at the institution, very steep from a student perspective, taking a variety of classes and excelling in all your classes, where are some areas that you would make some strategic investments?
I definitely think investing in Black student organizations, not just Black, I guess I should say, just general cultural student organizations. While I love Hale Hall and where our Office of Diversity and Inclusion is, I often, at times as a student, felt like it was kind of out of the way and maybe treated a little bit more like it wasn't as central to campus as maybe it could have been. And I think that would have been an important factor. I mean, I know people who've never stepped foot in that building, and it was a very crucial part of my undergraduate experience. So I think that's something that would be important to, invest in. I also think in terms of professors, I only ever had maybe 2 Black professors. So I never really saw anybody who looked like me teaching. And I know that's difficult. I think that's a difficult thing to do anywhere, to get, people of color to be professors at your university. But I think that's something that should be kind of a priority, because, having a professor, or a teacher in general, even at like a young age, who looks like you, treats you like they understand your experience, can have a huge impact on your education. And I'd say the Black professors that I did have had a big impact on, my interests and what I ended up going to do. So.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And you did a good job, Madam President. Those are things that we're thinking about as an institution. So, Tom, just hearing what Taylor just shared with the audience, what resonates with you, what she just shared?
Well, my hope is President Stokes will also invest in the College of Social Work. But beyond that, what resonates with me is increasing the diversity of our faculty and staff. It is so important. Students need to see somebody that looks like them. They need to work with people that understand their path. The other thing I think that we have to reflect on is we're a place of higher education. We do have a finish line. You get a degree, and we take great pride in all the people we get across the finish line. When we're talking about diversity and first gen students and many other folks, we need to think more about the starting line. Folks come in here with tremendous disadvantage in terms of income, in terms of resources, in terms of maybe the K through 12 they got to have. We know in this country, for example, we spend, because of how we choose to fund K through 12 in this country, $23 billion less a year or more a year on high income white kids than low income Black kids. So there's when you come here, you're coming here with a much bigger lift and usually much less resources. My 2 children's limits for their education was my checkbook, as long as I could help them. Not everybody has that ability. So I hope that we also give a lot of attention to the starting line and all the things we have to help people overcome when they get here.
Craig, this is a question that came from the audience, and I just want to make sure that we attempt to try to respond, because I sense from the chat that the person is really grappling with this. And, when you do diversity, equity, and inclusion work, we always grappling with things, where should we spend our time? But this is a specific question. This person said that he's struggling with, his organization is struggling with whether we think about D&I as his own strategy, or rather do we think about it as being integrated within existing strategies? What have you found to be most effective, independent strategy or integrated strategy in a larger plan?
It has to be both.
Okay.
And I'm not giving that answer as a cheat or a cop out. It has to be both, because if it is only its own strategy, it's in a silo. But if we're counting on it to be part of the integrated strategies, oftentimes what happens is, because you hear corporations say this, no, we're not going to have a chief diversity officer or a diversity, equity, and inclusion team, because if we do that, we've said to the organization that, oh, they'll take care of it. You don't have to worry about it. That sounds like a great idea, and with all due respect to a university, that sounds like an academic's view. Because that's not the way it works. We have tried every which way. If you rely on the organization to drive it, you are now relying on some of the individual pockets, and in many cases, the leaders of those individual pockets, for your success or your failure. It is essential. We have found that yes, having embedded teams is key. In fact, we have 5 embedded teams, diversity, equity, and inclusion teams within our businesses. So that's a within, but that's also key to the point that someone, I believe today, and there may be those that disagree with me, but I believe today, someone must be getting up every single day who is 100% focused on DE and I initiatives. Because if they're running a business simultaneously, it sounds great to say, but they can do it at the same time as running the business. The reality is it doesn't always work that way. So you must have an overall strategy, and you must have a strategy within the businesses as well. But I think if you have one or the other, I don't think you're set up for success.
If I could comment on that as well, real quick, James, I really appreciated Craig's answer. It is both. As we've talked a lot, our message to our leaders on this campus is you can't delegate your work to us. We'll be your guide, we'll be your helper. But if you don't allow diversity and inclusion to show up everywhere, you're going to miss the opportunity to identify practices that are holding people back. It needs to intrude on all the decisions we make. How does, when we hold our meetings, when we travel, we've a lot of opportunity to look at that right now during COVID. As I have people working all over the place, we're really rethinking when we meet, what we expect. Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 is sort of pointless at this point if you have some kids at home. So we shift to focus on task instead of time. But I just really liked that answer. And you also need to have somebody that obsesses about it on behalf of the organization.
Well, I want us to I would love to hear your perspectives. As you all know, right now we all waiting patiently. Well, some of us are being impatient. Some are waiting patiently for who's going to be our next president. And we know that whomever is going to be in the White House is going to shape our work in some way or in some form. So I'm going to start with first. Let's start with if our current president, the incumbent, remains the president, wins the election, how do we think our work will change in the DE&I space? We'll start with Tom first.
We have an executive order hanging over us from our current president. And so our first agenda will be to step up our advocacy game, work with our attorneys, with our legislators, and work to be able to do the work within that. I'm not willing to think about us having to backslide and give up some of that work based on that. So and I would challenge all of us to be unwilling to do that. So let's step up our advocacy game. Let's push back against that. Let's learn about how to work with the rules and continue to do the work that we have to do. I think that's going to be a big step. As always, after every election, there's going to be a lot of healing. There needs to be opportunities for people from both sides to come to terms with having won or lost. But hopefully we can create an environment that is inclusive for everybody as well along the way. But we will have to step up our advocacy game.
Taylor, how do you think our work will change if the incumbent wins the election.
I definitely agree with Dean Gregoire on this. I think it's just a matter of continuing those efforts and speaking up for what you believe in. At the end of the day, like, despite that change, that executive order that's hanging over your guys' heads, it's still, I mean, it's ultimately a decision that you make. You could take that and, you know, decide, oh, well, we can't put any funding towards this. But at the end of the day, like, if you, like, you still have choice in that. You can still push for those kinds of efforts. So I think it'll just be very important to continue to use your voice and speak up for what you think is right.
Thank you. Craig.
You know, the executive order what is fairly current. So I don't think that we meaning the world or the country, really has a sense for what enforcement's going to look like. So I would be premature in answering this, because I think it's very possible that there are very, very real consequences that would prohibit certain types of training. And I don't think any company is willing to step up and say, oh, well, we're going to do it anyway. So I think that we need to see what that really looks like. But I think there are ways to still address the issue, I do believe, while still adhering to the order, which of course we intend to do, as we know more. But we may just have to be more creative in the way that we have these conversations. But the very nature of the order, again, I don't want to make this a political statement, but the very nature of the order is sending a message to DEI practitioners and to people who work against injustice, social injustice and inequality, because what that statement says is that there is not a belief that there is systemic injustice. So it's going to take a reckoning for a lot of us, and I would be being dishonest if I were telling you that I knew what that's going to look like. But our work will continue, and you know, I believe that our work would actually be never more important than if an order like that remains in place.
So now let's think about the former vice president. If the former vice president become the new president, Taylor, how do you see our work changing?
I don't know if that decision is going to just suddenly make it like, oh, diversity and inclusion we're good, everything's good now, you know. I don't know if it'll truly have that much an effect other than potentially stopping that executive order. I think ultimately the work is still going to be there. There's going to still need to be efforts made, and it just being elected wouldn't be enough to be like, oh, yep, all good. So I definitely think the work would still be there. It would seem more positive for, at least in my personal opinion, more positive for diversity and inclusion efforts. I think that's something that's valued in that campaign, but I don't know if that necessarily means that the work just disappears.
Thank you. Tom.
Yeah, I'm with Taylor on this one. This work of diversity, inclusion, whatever we called it, spans a lot of presidents and a long time, and it precedes Underground Railroads. This work will, whoever leads us, if we're going to make progress at the national level, we're going to need somebody who can bring people together. And we've had moments like that in our past. You know, in an 18-month period in the 1960s, we passed Medicare, Medicaid, Voting Rights Act, Food Stamps Act. We revised immigration. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. We could come together as a political leadership and do some right things. And we'll see if that happens, and we'll keep doing this work regardless, because whatever else it is nationally, it's also local. If I can do something for the person across the hall so they feel more accepted, so they feel more of a sense of community. I succeeded no matter who the president is.
Thank you. Greg?
Well, on this, we don't have to guess, because we have seen what Joe Biden, has done as vice president. In some cases, says he would do things differently, but he's been unequivocal in terms of what his emphasis will be. And let's not forget that he doesn't come by himself. He comes with a Black, Asian vice president. I don't even know how to begin to, it's like that moment when President Obama was elected the first time. He comes with a female Black vice president if Biden wins the presidency. And we know what her life experience has been and what is important to her, as it was to Barack and Michelle Obama. So I think we can have I think we can pretty much guess what the emphasis is going to be. She's going to, and he is going to bring those experiences to bear on the administration and put an emphasis. I mean, again, don't trust me. Listen to what they've said about immigration, about injustice. They've been pretty clear, and of course they have to deliver on it, but I do believe that they will. So I think that we need, what is the old saying, when someone tells you who they are, believe them? I think that was Maya Angelou. I always get it slightly wrong. In both cases, they've told us.
Thank you. And so we're coming down to the end. This has been a rich, hearty dialogue, and I'm going to give you all 1 minute to share any kind of closing remarks or prevailing thoughts that you may want to leave with the audience. And we'll start with Taylor.
I guess the final remarks I would make is just that this, and as we said before, of course, this is a little bit of an echo chamber, but I would just continue to say how important this type of work is and how crucial it can be in somebody's life in changing the trajectory of what they do. I think it's something that I will value for the rest of my life and will always look for in anything that I do. And I think, we can say we all want this, but we definitely have to go out there and show it. So I hope that as a University of Ohio State does that, and I hope that, several corporations can work to do that as well. I think it's all we can ask for, all we can hope for. So thank you for having me on this panel as well. I appreciate getting to speak to this topic. It's something I care a lot about.
Thank you. Tom.
I'll start with my thanks too. It's been a real pleasure to be with you, James and Taylor and Craig, and with all of you who've joined us. Abandon all hope of being an expert. You don't have to know what to do next. You just have to know how to listen and to understand, and let people be your teacher. I have a number of people around here that I've occasionally heard you recite a few of my accomplishments in this space. I could quickly tell you who my co-authors of all of those were. So just because you don't know what to do next doesn't mean you couldn't just ask people, what could I do next? But first of all, meet people where they are. As I've said before, ask people, how are you doing and how can I help? And if you're genuine about this, you'll find your way together towards what needs to happen next.
Greg.
Well, thank you. Again, thank you to the three of you and the others at OSU who helped put this together, and to those of you who, again, I think I'm quoting you, I can't remember who said this, I think maybe Dr. Gregoire, those of you who either gave your breakfast or your lunch hour to us. We really do appreciate this. It's obviously a topic that's greatly important to me as well as to my fellow panelists. Keep your eye on the prize. Tune out the noise sometimes, because there are angry people coming from all sides. For some people, you're not doing it fast enough. For some, you're doing it too fast. Others tell you that you're on the wrong track entirely. Take the counsel and adjust if necessary, but you sometimes really do have to just close your ears for a moment and think, my aim on this is true. I know that this is the right thing ethically. It's the right thing for my company. It's the right thing personally. And no matter what comes along, do not be discouraged for long. Certainly there are moments when I've gotten up and some weeks are harder than others. And you just think, wow, how do I keep doing this? Well, you do. You get up, you dust yourself off, and you just keep going. So trust in your instincts and trust in the mission.
Thank you. As we draw to a close, I'd like to thank our distinguished panelists, Taylor, Craig, and Tom, for sitting down with me today. I would really like to thank our audience for their thoughtful questions as well as well-reasoned perspectives. I'd like to remind folks that we will be sending out an email that can be used to engage with us with any other follow-up. We have more Driving Change discussions planned, so we hope that you will continue to join us as well as share about the Driving Change series. Check your email for any updates, as well as we encourage you to go to the Office of Diversity Inclusion website, www.odi.osu.edu. Thank you again, and I now yield the rest of my time to Kurt Ely. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Moore, Craig, Tom, Taylor. Thank you for your time, leadership, and participation. Taylor, the best of luck with your focus on law school. Craig, the Ohio State University greatly appreciates our relationship with NBC Universal and look forward to continued engagements. And Dr. Moore and Dean Gregoire, as always, we greatly appreciate your leadership. I'd also like to thank all participants today for taking the time to share part of your day with us. You'll receive the follow-up, as Dr. Moore indicated, via email with links to the recorded webinar and contact information for any request for additional information and follow-up. Thank you and have a great day.